The Freeway Phantom. A name whispered in fear. A name that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to speak it aloud. A specter that haunted the streets of Washington, D.C. in the early 1970s. The city, known for its political power and historical significance, became the hunting ground for a faceless terror. He preyed on young black girls, leaving a trail of heartbreak and terror in his wake. 6 innocent lives were stolen, their families forever scarred. Each family, each community gathering, was a testament to the pain and fear that gripped the city. The city held its breath, united in fear and desperation, but the Phantom was a ghost, always a step ahead, leaving behind a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. The nights were long and filled with dread, as the city waited for the next strike. The killings began in the spring of 1971. Each victim was abducted, then brutally murdered. The methodical nature of the crime suggested a calculated mind, one that reveled in the chaos and pain it caused. Their bodies were discarded along the city's highways, left like gruesome signposts in the Phantom's twisted game. Each location was a macabre message, a taunt to the authorities, and a reminder to the public of the ever-present danger. The police were baffled. The city was paralyzed by fear. Law enforcement, despite their best efforts, found themselves chasing shadows, always one step behind the elusive killer. Who was this monster? And why were young black girls his targets? The questions echoed through the community, but answers remained frustratingly out of reach. The sketches and descriptions provided little comfort, as the Phantom remained an enigma. The lack of answers only intensified the terror. Parents kept their daughters close, afraid to let them out of sight. The fear was palpable, a constant companion in the daily lives of the city's residents. The streets felt different, the air thick with suspicion and dread. Every stranger was a potential threat, every shadow a possible hiding place for the Phantom. The murders continued, each one a hammer blow to the community's already frayed sense of security. Vigils were held, candles lit in memory of the lost, but the darkness seemed impenetrable. The city was held hostage by an invisible enemy, an enemy that thrived on fear and confusion, leaving a legacy of pain and unanswered questions. The Phantom's reign of terror remains a chilling chapter in the history of Washington, D.C., a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the heart of a city. Carol Spinks, a bright-eyed 13-year-old, was the first victim. She vanished on April 25, 1971. Carol had been running an errand, her last known steps taken on a busy D.C. street. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through the city. This wasn't a runaway case. This was something far more sinister. Days later, her body was found. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled, her body left near a freeway ramp. The news of her murder sent a chill down the spines of every parent in the city. The randomness of the crime was terrifying. It could have been anyone's daughter. For Carol's family, the world shattered. Their little girl, full of life and laughter, was gone, snatched away by a predator. The pain was immeasurable, compounded by the unanswered questions. Who could do this? And why Carol? The police investigation was met with dead ends. There were no witnesses, no leads, no trace of the monster who took Carol. The lack of answers only fueled the fear and anger simmering in the community. Carol's murder was a stark reminder of their vulnerability, a wound that refused to heal. 2 months later, the Phantom struck again. This time, his victim was 13-year-old Darlene Atkins. On July 1, 1971, Darlene left her home to run an errand for her mother. She hailed a cab, a seemingly ordinary act that would turn into a nightmare. Darlene never made it to her destination. Her body was found the next day, discarded near another freeway. She had been strangled, her body bearing the same horrific hallmarks as Carol Spinks. The city was in the grip of terror. The Phantom was still out there, preying on innocent girls. The cab driver became a key suspect. He had picked up Darlene that day, making him the last known person to see her alive. But the investigation hit a wall. There was not enough evidence to link him definitively to the crime. The driver maintained his innocence, claiming he dropped Darlene off safely. The lack of a concrete suspect only intensified the fear gripping the city. The randomness of the attacks was unnerving. The Phantom was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing at will, leaving behind a trail of grief and despair. Brenda Crockett, a 10-year-old with a bright smile and infectious laugh, became the Phantom's third victim. On July 28, 1971, she vanished while running an errand for her grandmother. She promised to be quick, her last words echoing in her grandmother's ears long after she disappeared. Brenda's disappearance sparked a massive search. The police, aided by hundreds of volunteers, scoured the city, desperately hoping to find her alive. But their hopes were dashed when her body was discovered the next day. She had been strangled. Her body left near a freeway, just like the others. The city was in shock. The Phantom's ruthlessness was beyond comprehension. He was targeting younger and younger girls, his brutality escalating with each murder. The fear in the city was palpable, a suffocating blanket of dread. Brenda's murder pushed the community to a breaking point. They demanded action, answers, justice. The police were under immense pressure to catch the killer, but the Phantom remained elusive, a shadow lurking in the city's underbelly. Section 5, Nenomoshia Yates, Stolen Innocence. Nenomoshia Yates, a sweet and quiet 12-year-old, became the Phantom's fourth victim. On August 1, 1971, she was sent on an errand by her mother. She promised to be careful, her last words a haunting reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. Nenomoshia never made it home. Her body was found the next day discarded near a freeway like the others. The cause of death was strangulation. Her murder, coming just days after Brenda Crockett's, sent shockwaves through the city. The Phantom was toying with them, his boldness growing with each passing day. The police were no closer to catching the killer. The investigation was plagued by dead ends and false leads. The lack of progress fueled the public's anger and frustration. The city felt helpless at the mercy of a ruthless predator. Nenomoshia's murder highlighted the racial dynamics at play. The victims were all young black girls, their lives seemingly disposable in the eyes of the killer. The lack of media attention compared to cases with white victims further fueled the community's outrage. As the investigation stretched on, the leads began to dry up. Detectives faced one dead end after another, their frustration mounting. The lack of progress cast a shadow over the community, leaving more questions than answers. In the absence of concrete evidence, theories and speculations started to fill the void. Rumors circulated, each more elaborate than the last, as people struggled to make sense of the senseless. The Phantom left behind a legacy of fear and mystery that lingered long after the case grew cold. The unresolved nature of the crimes haunted the affected families and the community, embedding itself into local folklore. Justice may have been denied, but hope endures. The families of the victims and the community at large continue to seek closure, holding on to the belief that one day the truth will emerge.